Hello, everyone. I'm Mimi Lichtenstein, and today I'm excited to be here with Greg Tepper. We are going to talk all about the very unique destination of Russia. Greg, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Mimi. Great to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you on because Russia's always been somewhere I've been intrigued by, and I bet a lot of people are. You and I were talking a little before the show that we plan these dates months in advance. So obviously there's a lot going on in Russia right now, and we're not suggesting anybody plan a trip there tomorrow. But when people are ready to travel and when the world settles down, a lot of what we'll talk about today will be fun and helpful for your visit. So
yes, I hope so.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, I think you've been doing this for a long time. Maybe you've brought 800 plus people to Russia over the years. Tell us a little bit about your background and how you got interested.
Yeah, actually, I've been in the travel business for almost 30 years now. And actually, we send about 800 people to Russia in a normal year per year. So,
yeah, per year.
Yeah. So, we've sent over the years tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people to Russia to experience it. My background was I studied Russian in high school and then continued through college and ended up with a Russian studies major in college. So I speak Russian. I lived there. I moved there in the early 90s when it was transitioning from communism to capitalism. So I have a bit of Russia in my blood. It's a fascination, a hobby that kind of took over my career.
Okay. And so when you lived there, were you in Moscow or St. Petersburg?
I was in St. Petersburg, yeah.
Okay.
And I happened to work with one of the very first independent tour companies when I moved over there in '92. So I had no intention necessarily to get into the travel business, but it was my interest in Russia that it all just sort of fell in my lap. And when the country was transitioning from communism to capitalism, new hotels were opening, new restaurants. We were able to control our travelers' experiences with better guides and customized programs that were never available for 70 years during the Soviet Union.
Wow. Well, that's why we're so happy to have you on today, because Russia is one of those places where you definitely want to go with somebody who knows what they're doing. So you are the perfect person to talk to, as we always do. So we're going to start just looking at a map. I thought it was funny because when you and I were getting ready for the show and we were talking about the different places, and I started throwing off some off the beaten path places in Russia, and you're like, Mimi, actually, maybe not those places. So pretty much 99.9% of the people you say go to Russia or go to Moscow or St. Petersburg. Is that right?
That's correct. And really, for hundreds of years, Russia was the European part of Russia. If you look at that map, Moscow and St. Petersburg are really part of Europe, and the vast majority of the landmass is part of Asia. So at the Ural Mountains, which are like the left third or the western third of the country, that divides Europe and Asia, and it's a vast, not very heavily populated part of the world. But really, what draws people to Russia is not vast unpopulated areas, but the culture and history. And all of that culture and history sprung from Moscow and St. Petersburg.
Mm-hmm. And if you look at the very, very far east, I think where that little star is, that's where Lake Baikal is, which I had told Greg I'd read the book, The Long Walk, that's based on some prisoners of war walking by Lake Baikal. But I mean, it is very far in the middle of nowhere. So it's not like it's just a lake that someone's going to go have a summer vacation at. So
it's a great stop on the Trans-Siberian Train. And the train is the experience in and of itself. So you're on the train for 8 or 9 days. There's a private train. And one of the stops is Baikal, and it's spectacular. They also stop in some other smaller towns. Again, all of the smaller towns that are of interest are in the area of Moscow and St. Petersburg. So Kazan and Samara, and there are many medium to small sized towns.
Okay, great. Well, so let's dive in. I mean, the reason you go to Russia, as you said, is culture. Beautiful building. Tell us a little bit about what it's like to be in Moscow, and let's talk about some of the there's lots of UNESCO sites. There's, food and shopping and all the regular stuff, but what are the highlights?
I think what shocks people the most about Moscow is that it's an absolutely stunningly beautiful city.
Hmm.
And no one would create architecture like what you're looking at right now in the Kremlin from without a whimsical kind of concept as to creativity and color. And we think of Moscow often as a place that's dark and gray and cold and depressing. And then you get there and it's just full of color. And over the past 20 years, the city has been lit and repainted and pedestrianized. So major thoroughfares are now full of cafes and shops. If you go there in the summer or in the winter, you'll see a city that you had no idea would look like this. And I always say that the other thing about Moscow is that Red Square is one of the few sites in the world that does not disappoint. It's not smaller than you think it is. It should be. The colors, the drama of that square is so extraordinary with Lenin's tomb there and St. Basil's Cathedral and the Kremlin walls and the Grand Kremlin Palace inside. So
Yeah.
that's always been my feeling. And I have to say, every time I'm there with travelers, it's the first thing they say. I expected St. Petersburg to be beautiful, and then Moscow was so stunning.
Hmm. I think, is it common? Have you worked with a lot of people where it's common that they have sort of St. Petersburg is number one on their list, but then they also decide that they'll go to Moscow and then they're equally pleased with Moscow?
That I have to say that quite often people think they're not going to go to Moscow, and we have to talk them into it. And I always tell people, if you're going to go through the trouble of getting a Russian visa, don't miss Moscow, even if it's for a couple of days. Then they come back and they say, I actually preferred Moscow to St. Petersburg. So it's a beautiful city. It has amazing art museums. The Kremlin is just stunning. As I said, the Red Square. This year, the Michelin guides came out with, I think it's 7 restaurants in Moscow have Michelin stars. So
Wow.
It's a great culinary city. It's very hip and fashionable city. So it really depends. Whatever it is that you're looking for, you're going to find it in Moscow.
Hmm. And so now we're looking at a picture of a stunning sunset with the river.
Mhm.
Is there a lot of action on the river? Are people taking little boats to go from place to place?
Mostly the river, I believe. Yeah, well, you can kind of see on the right side of the riverbank there, they have these evening riverboat canal cruises that go back and forth, and it's a wonderful way to see the city. Not so much small boats, not too many private boats. St. Petersburg does have those on the canals, but I do recommend, if your schedule allows, when you're in Moscow, to take one of those cruises. They even on some of the boats serve meals, like you can have a lunch cruise, you can have a dinner cruise.
Hmm. Beautiful. And then I think for a lot of people, when you think of Russia and things that they're famous for, one is vodka, another one is the ballet. Tell us a little bit about, I know there's some exclusive experiences going to the Russian ballet. Tell us a little bit more about, do a lot of people do that? And have you been, and what is it really like?
The arts are a big draw for Russia, and as we spoke about earlier, it might not be the ideal time to go to Russia right now, but the things that Russia has that you will never experience anywhere else, and the level of ballet, the level of opera, the level of symphony conducting in the theater, and then the paintings in the art museums, I could keep going on, are at such a level that you really can't experience that anywhere else. Not even in New York or Paris or London do they have the depth that they do in both the Bolshoi Theater in Moscow and the Mariinsky Theater in St. Petersburg. The Mariinsky, of course, changed its name back from the communist name, which was Kirov. So a lot of people still know the Kirov opera or the Kirov ballet, but it's the Mariinsky. And it's unforgettable. And when people come to us and say that that's what they're interested in, of course, we make sure that they get the best possible tickets to the performances while they're there. But they can do things like go backstage and do a backstage tour at the Bolshoi, which, by the way, finished an $800 million restoration and renovation a few years ago. So it's gorgeous. And then same in St. Petersburg at the Mariinsky, go backstage. We also, if you're really serious about ballet, we often take people into the Vaganova Ballet Academy, which is the Imperial Ballet Academy. It's a real school full of children come from all over the world, like a boarding school for ballet. So it's not for your casual, gosh, ballet's fun, but someone who says, I've taught ballet, I'm a passionate, ballet fan. We will take people in there, and they absolutely never forget it because you're an invited guest of the Academy for the day.
That sounds amazing. And I don't know how many little people go to Russia, families with younger children, but I did take my daughter to the New York Ballet once, and I had her do a class with a New York ballet dancer. He was a man, so not a ballerina. And it was magical. She looked absolutely adorable, and it was a really amazing experience. Is something like that doable in Moscow? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Absolutely. Moscow and St. Petersburg. We can do it. That's my favorite thing when I talk to people about their interests. And if someone tells me, my son or my daughter are interested in anything from chess or ballet or anything that soccer, even or boxing. I think we talked about that also, earlier. We can set up experiences that give them that contact, that especially at their age. They can meet people and other students who are interested in the same things that they are, and that takes it to a whole different level of experience.
Absolutely, and it makes it so that the kids are having an amazing time as well, which is always important. So another stunning picture of the Red Square.
Yes, yeah, that's an interesting picture. Comment about that picture. If you look to the left side of that picture, the red two gates. Yes, right there. Yeah. That is a restoration. Stalin had that removed so that if you know those old pictures during the Cold War of missiles and tanks rolling through Red Square, he couldn't get them through into Red Square without removing that. So that was gone for 50 years and then was replaced in the early 90s, mid 90s, and returned and restored to its rightful place.
Wow.
So, yeah, it's Red Square is a living history, and there's still talk about removing Lenin's tomb from Red Square, but it's a tourist attraction now, so hopefully they don't.
Yeah, well, that was on our list. So tell us, since you brought it up. So he's there, and you can go right up.
He's irrelevant to most Russians. There's no reverence for him, particularly his people who grew up back in the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, they did revere him and Stalin. But that's all, too much information has come out as to what he did to the country and such. So, and there's no one really misses communism, which he represents and what he brought to the Russian Empire. So it's become a tourist attraction. If you go there, it'll be 99% of the people in line to see it will be those people interested in history. Mm-hmm. And those people who are interested in a very dark experience of seeing a man embalmed. And he's still there, and he still looks like he might get up from the table at any time.
That's crazy, but right, for the right person, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it is living history, as I said. I find it interesting. I've done it several times myself. One of the things I like about going to Lenin's tomb is behind it are all of the communist era leaders. So Brezhnev. Even Stalin is there. Their tombs and their busts are behind Lenin's tomb, and you can only see them if you go see Lenin's tomb.
Okay, good to know. And then Moscow has their version of New York Central Park, where you can get out and about in some grassy, beautiful flower area, Gorky Park.
Gorky Park is really becoming gorgeous and really beautiful. There's a new contemporary art museum there called Garage, and so it's becoming a place that Russians love to go all seasons of the year, not just the summertime. And it was a pretty depressing place, I have to say, 25 years ago. And now I absolutely love it. And I love going to Garage. It depends on what exhibitions they have. But if you're interested in contemporary art, Garage should be on your list.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and for someone like you who has been going for, 25-ish years, how interesting to be able to see that transformation from, where they were to the beauty just in Gorky Park, as you said, where it is right now.
Yeah, the beautification of both cities has been dramatic, and it's something that the leadership in Moscow is very, very interested in, and so people can see that they live in a beautiful country. There are even rules about lighting up buildings in both cities. So because there's so much darkness in the winter, all the buildings that are, the beautiful facades and pastel colors, they're all lit so that it's like a piece of art as you walk down the street, even if it's, those dark winter months.
Yeah, fascinating. I could not put these up there. I had these when I was a kid. I can't pronounce them. Will you pronounce it for me?
Matryoshka.
Matryoshka dolls. So the little dolls, they're nesting dolls that go one in the other. I mean, so many American kids have these.
Yep.
Russia is the originator of them. Is that right?
Yeah, I hate to tell you Japan is, but
oh, are they? Well, why do we know them all from Russia then?
Yeah, the Russians made them popular, and it was a Russian tradition that was borrowed from the Japanese many years ago. I don't know if it's hundreds of years ago, but it is a truly Russian thing. But it's like so many things. I mean, pasta came from the Far East, and yet we think of Italy when we think of pasta and dumplings.
Yeah, that's true. And then, so transitioning to St. Petersburg, this does happen to be a cloudy, gray sky day in this particular photo, but we're going to believe you that sometimes it's blue skies and sunny.
Oh yeah. We had some super hot weather. I was in St. Petersburg this past June, and it was sunny and 95 degrees Fahrenheit almost every day I was there, which I like to tell people that Russia does cold better than it does hot. So if you're concerned about comfort and normally crowds, I stay out of the summer months. Like, late June, July, and August is not the best time to go because theaters all closed. It's not a good time for opera, ballet, and symphony. Cruise ships come into St. Petersburg, and that it releases a lot of people. So it's great to go in the spring and the fall, and of course I love the winter there. But nobody goes to Russia for the weather,
No.
I say. But like a building like the Winter Palace that you're looking at, the Hermitage, is not air conditioned except in a few rooms. So if you go in there with 10,000 people, it's going to be warm and uncomfortable in that palace.
Okay, that is a good tip. I'll say the other thing to think about, we were in Alaska last summer, it stays light until 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night, which I love in the summertime personally. St. Petersburg, same thing, right? In the middle of summer, how many hours a day are you getting sunlight?
Yeah, the whole period between late May into late June is called the White Nights. And it's the White Nights because it's white almost all night long. It's light almost all night long. It gets to be dusk for just a little bit, maybe 90 minutes, 2 hours from like 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, and then the sun comes up again. So
crazy.
You lose all sense of time.
Yeah. And actually, good question. We'll talk about some hotels later on, but do most of the luxury hotels then have blackout blinds in the room, I would hope?
They do. I do encourage people, if you're very light sensitive, to bring your eye shades or take them off the airplane if they give them to you on the plane. And the reason for that is that there are very few hotels in the world that can create 100% blackout. And if the sun will go up, and even with heavy dark curtains, the room will start getting light.
Mm-hmm. And for an everyday Russian living in St. Petersburg, like, do people in their homes all have blackout blinds in their bedrooms, or are they just used to it?
They grew up with it. So
yeah.
I don't know anyone who complains. Like they can sleep right through at 6 o'clock in the morning, 5 o'clock in the morning when it's like midday. Sunlight in June, and people sleep until 9 o'clock. But I do think that we all need a little less sleep in the summertime and a little more sleep in the wintertime. I think that's a natural circadian fact. The Russians have it in the extreme.
Yeah. It's kind of like being a kid growing up in Chicago next to the elevated train, and by the time you're 12 or 16, you don't even notice that it's going by, I guess. So
exactly.
Okay, so this is one of the reasons that St. Petersburg has always been on my list. I look at this building and I think, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful, I must see that. Yep. Tell us more about it.
So that's the Church on Spilled Blood, which it was Alexander II was assassinated on that spot, and that was his favorite type of architecture. But if you look at the building to the left, you'll see that Italian Renaissance type of architecture. And that is when Peter the Great founded St. Petersburg in 1703. He did not want the traditional Russian architecture in that city at all. So it was forbidden. So the church on the right was forbidden by Peter the Great, and was only because his ancestors loved that traditional Russian architecture. That and almost that alone is the only onion domed, very, very Russian church in the whole city of St. Petersburg, which I always think is so ironic because it's one of the symbols of St. Petersburg is that church. But yeah, so his son Alexander III had that cathedral built. It is one of the only churches or cathedrals built inside and out of mosaic. So the inside is as stunning and beautiful of semi-precious stones as the outside is, as you can see. And it's on one of the major canals of St. Petersburg.
Love it. It's so beautiful. Here's a great picture. I included a picture of you in there.
Yes.
Where, oh, this is in front of it from another direction?
No, that's actually Red Square. That
is Red Square.
Back in Moscow. But they, as you can see, they look very similar because of the type of onions. Right.
Yeah.
So it was a great example of that architecture is what Peter the Great grew up with and did not want to bring into his new city at all. He wanted his city to be a window onto Europe. So he did not allow churches like that to be built in St. Petersburg.
And it looks like the Church of the Savior of Spilled Blood has, like you said, it's mosaic. So it has definitely a different facade than the one that's in Moscow. Okay.
Yeah, the Moscow is it's brick, painted brick, and and the other is it's covered in tiles, colored tiles.
It's beautiful. And we always love meeting fascinating people when we go places. And I feel like Russia's probably full of fascinating people. Maybe we can't talk to all of them, but some of them, you help us do that. Tell us a little bit about who you're talking with here.
Yeah, actually, this is was a very, very famous guy during the 80s because he was the primary and really the only translator for Mikhail Gorbachev. His name is Pavel Pazhichenko, and a super wonderful guy. And for people who are interested in politics, I mean, of course, his English is flawless. We love to set up a meeting with someone like Pavel to just understand, ask him all the questions that you had about U.S.-Soviet relations, what it was like meeting Reagan during their summits together. So anyway, he's a terrific guy, and you're right. It's a good example of somebody giving us information about what they're interested in, and then allowing us to suggest all sorts of people that you could meet, whether it's in politics or in the arts or in everyday life. We've even had doctors who wanted to go meet their contemporaries and do rounds with them in a Russian hospital. So yeah, and it, as I said, it just takes a regular trip to elevates it to a completely different level.
Absolutely. And I think another person that you could potentially meet is a retired KGB officer.
Yeah, absolutely. He actually founded the Kgb Museum in the Lubyanka building. Unfortunately, the museum has been closed, but he still is happy to sit down and meet with our travelers who are interested also in some of the stories of the Cold War and the CIA and the KGB going at each other behind the scenes quietly and spying on each other, and even has some of the gadgets that they used. But yeah, he's a fascinating guy.
Yeah, I think for some teenagers too, right? They could be easily fascinated in something like this.
Absolutely.
And then give us a little insight into the culinary aspects of Russia. I don't personally think of Russian food. I'm like, I must go to Russia to eat Russian food, but maybe you feel differently. Tell us a little bit more about like one of your favorite restaurants and what kind of food people like to try there.
Well, I would be totally honest that the Russian food was not the thing that made me excited about Russia ever. You got to remember that it's in a very cold environment. Not a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables for most of their time. I'm talking about through history, hundreds of years. So the food that they have is lots of, boiled meats and dumplings like pelmeni you probably heard of, and pickled everything, which can be delicious. But we're used to fresh salads and fresh fruit and fresh herbs, and that was just not part of the Russian diet. But what's happened over the last few years is that restaurants have taken those classic Russian dishes and elevated them with ingredients that were not available. So there's a restaurant in Moscow that serves handmade dumplings, pelmeni, but instead of being stuffed only with red meat, they're stuffed with crab or mushrooms or a delicious roasted fish or the completely different approach to a classic Russian meal.
Mhm.
One of the things I love also, when we talk about Russia, we think it was a big empire, and also part of the empire were regional cuisines. And one of my favorite regional cuisine is Georgian cuisine, which does appeal. It is so far to the south, they do have fresh herbs and vegetables and fruit. So it's heavy on all of those things. Lots of fresh basil and cilantro, lots of grilled chicken. And the national dish of Georgia is called khachapuri, which is a baked cheesy bread. Imagine fresh pizza dough thrown into an oven, brought out to your table. It is delicious. So
We'll eat that.
yeah,
That's good.
I've never met a traveler from North America who didn't go absolutely nuts at a Georgian restaurant.
Yeah, well, especially maybe if you've been eating boiled meat and potatoes for a few days. It
Well,
sounds
as I said, I don't think that you don't really get that anymore in Russia. They've really elevated it. So I think I was talking to you before the show that there are 7 Michelin-starred restaurants in Moscow alone. So this is if you're used to if you're a foodie and you're used to great cities like Paris or New York, you will not run out of extraordinary culinary experiences in Moscow and St. Petersburg.
okay. Well, we like over-the-top experiences, and sometimes that means, Michelin star tasting menus. So that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. You gave me ahead of time, and we have a few pictures of some of your favorite hotels between St. Petersburg and Moscow, including, we'll start in St. Petersburg, the Four Seasons.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about why you like the Four Seasons in St. Petersburg.
Well, Four Seasons St. Petersburg has an extraordinary central location right in between St. Isaac's Cathedral and the Winter Palace and the Hermitage. It's a beautiful historic facade of a building, the palace. The whole interior was ruined through history. So they created a very modern, technologically advanced hotel inside this historic facade. So it's a perfect location. And for those people who have fallen in love with Four Seasons as a brand, you're going to find everything that you expect at this Four Seasons.
Nice. And they have a variety of rooms that have terraces, which number one, I love outdoor spaces and rooms. And then I love it when they have a view. And I think they have some of both of those.
It's not my favorite room during the winter, but it is in the summer. So like, as you see in this picture here, you have some of the rooms have enormous outdoor terraces with historic views over the city. It's on the mansard, the top roof of the Four Seasons. So just have great views and wonderful rooms, but really just in the months that you would spend some time outside.
Mm-hmm. And I think this is the view from the Four Seasons or near the Four Seasons, right?
It's not too far away, but that is not the actual view of the Four Seasons.
No. Okay. Yeah, not of the Four Seasons. Okay. And Roccoforte, another one of my favorite brands. They have a great hotel there too.
Yeah. So the Hotel Astoria was built just before the revolution. It started in 1913. The hotel opened. If you can imagine, it was only open for 4 years before World War I broke out, and then the revolution, right after that. So, but it's the oldest, or one of the 2 oldest hotels that was built as a hotel. And I absolutely love it. It's famous for during World War II. This is where Hitler expected to have his victory dinner, and he even printed up invitations. Of course, he never got into Leningrad at the time, which is now St. Petersburg. But it's a great hotel. It's right across the street from the Four Seasons, right by St. Isaac's, even closer to the Mariinsky, the Kgb Theater. It has great history. It has great charm. The rooms have been beautifully restored and renovated by Roccoforte, and it's probably my personal favorite.
And it's interesting because the decor here is very different than some of the other ones, where it's much more of the sort of opulent Russian detail. This is very minimalist, it seems to me.
It is. It's very clean. I mean, Roccoforte's sister Olga does the design of many of his hotels, and she has a very clean aesthetic, Italian, English aesthetic. But again, if you look at the ceiling in here, it has all the architectural details of a building built over 100 years ago. So that's the feeling that you get when you're inside the Astoria. And I don't know if we have a picture of the lobby, but it's absolutely gorgeous.
I don't think we do.
Okay.
All right. And we'll go to Moscow real quick. So there's another Four Seasons in Moscow.
Yeah, the irony about this Four Seasons is almost in Red Square, which is great unless there's a big government event, and they actually, if you have a view of Red Square from your room, they will block your windows with blackout shades that you are not allowed to touch. So
Oh my gosh.
it's always good to know what days you're going to be there, because if you're there in May, like during the Victory Parade, you cannot use your view. As a matter of fact, you'll be blocked out from it. But the building, and again, something that only Russians would do, was completely destroyed, dismantled, and then a replica was built. And so this is a replica of the building that was built in the 50s by Stalin's order, or even the late 40s. It's also the building, if you look at Stolichная Vodka, that's the Hotel Moskva, which is that recreation on a part of it is where the Four Seasons in Moscow is. So again, it's the insides are not historic, but the location is mind-blowingly spectacular. You literally just step out the front door and you're in Red Square.
I love that. Mind-blowingly spectacular. That's a great description.
Great.
We like staying at mind-blowingly spectacular places.
Yeah.
I love this one because it has lots of outdoor space.
Yes, yeah. So the Park Hyatt, I love this hotel. It's just a very comfortable, charming hotel. Small. You're looking toward Red Square, and that building that you see on the right side of the photo is the backside of the Four Seasons. So you can see where everything is very, very close. And then the other building that is on the left side, down through the glass guardrail, is the Metropole Hotel, which I think I also mentioned.
You did, but I don't have a picture of it. But yes, so okay, they're all very close together.
Very close together, and then actually to the right on this photo, this is a great photo to use, is the Bolshoi Theater. So all of the opera, ballet, and symphony that you would want to see is right there. So you can stay at any of those three hotels and walk across the street, and you're seconds away from the best of opera, ballet, and symphony.
Perfect. Oh, and I thought this was quite a fancy photo. So it's kind of looks like you're in some sort of a glass domed, garden.
Yep. Yeah. And that whole outside terrace in the summertime, they have grilled sandwiches, grilled chicken, hamburgers. So it's a wonderful place to come back after some sightseeing and sit out there, have a glass of wine, overlook that view of the Bolshoi Theater that you saw in the other picture. It's really wonderful. I agree. If I choose for myself which of these hotels I stay in, it's often the Park Hyatt.
Oh, we love to hear that. Okay, good to know. I'll make a note of that. And then what about new hotels opening up, or recent hotels that have opened up? Tell us a little bit about those.
So I just actually, just a couple of hours ago, played the video of the new general manager of the Bulgari Moscow, and learned a bit about that hotel. It's going to be 80 rooms, not far away from these three hotels that we've been discussing, but very, very Bulgari. So if you've ever seen their other hotels, inside will look exactly like the Bulgari in Paris. So it's not really for people seeking history so much as people who are fashionistas interested in that kind of cool Italian vibe, or a five-star hotel that's quite boutique. The Metropole Hotel that I did mention is truly the most historic hotel in Moscow, and is finishing an extraordinary top to bottom restoration and renovation, and that will be completed sometime in this year. So either this summer or this fall. All the rooms are beautiful. It's hard for me to describe a hotel that is such a part of the history of a city, but that is the Metropole. There's a book, since we were talking about books, called A Gentleman in Moscow, which is fiction, but it's based on an aristocrat who was forced to live in this five-star hotel after the revolution, which of course wouldn't happen in reality, but it's a fun book, and it's all based on the Metropole. And,
okay.
It's a lot.
And so since you brought up books, are there any others that you would recommend that would be sort of intriguing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction, about wanting to go to Russia?
I also mentioned earlier that Russian history reads like fiction. So you don't need to fictionalize Russian history. If you read the biography of Catherine the Great by Robert Massey, you just can't believe that this German princess came at 16 years old to St. Petersburg and then ended up being the empress for decades. So I love that book. Actually, Robert Massey and Suzanne Massey, they were married at one time, wrote some of the best books on Russian history. Suzanne's book, Pavlovsk, is the history of the Palace of Pavlovsk. I absolutely love it. It's a great way to learn some Russian history through art and architecture, which is how this palace got built and why it got built. But yeah, there's Natasha's Dance, which is a great Russian, like a review of Russian history. That is Orlando Figes, is a wonderful writer as well. As I said, I love Russian history, and those books all give you that drive. You'll put that book down, and then you'll absolutely want to go back to Russia.
Yeah, I love giving people that for gifts at Christmas time, or for birthdays. It's so fun to read something. It's like long ago when A Year in Provence came out, right? And like people started showing up at Peter Mail's door in Provence because they all wanted to go sort of experience his life. So anything that inspires people to travel is something that I love.
I agree. I think books inspire travel almost more than anything. And I love to grab one of those books and take it with me on the way to the destination, because you're reading things and you're like, I just read that yesterday. We don't remember all the details, but if you grab one of those books and do just a little bit of reading on the airplane, it can make the trip that much better.
100%. Okay, so at this point of the show, I always like to talk about some takeaway tips or insights about different things we need to think about. And earlier on, you brought up visas. Tell me a little bit about what is sort of the process or the hoops you have to jump through to get a visa to go to Russia.
So the Russian visa still is an arduous process. The Russians have a big approach to reciprocity. So if the U.S. government makes it difficult for Russians to get an American visa, the Russians make it very difficult. And the application itself is long and has a lot of questions on it. And it is an exact translation of the application that the U.S. government requires of Russians to get an American visa. So as much as we like to complain, we can only complain about ourselves, that this process is not that easy, because this is what we do to the Russians.
Interesting.
But we take our clients through our travelers through the whole process and make it very, very easy. So it's not an obstacle. If you need an emergency visa and you want to go next week, we can make that happen. If we're given the time, I always recommend that we get 3 or multiple entry visas for our travelers, so they can go back, even if it's 2 years later, and just pop into St. Petersburg while they're in Europe, which is an easy thing to do when you have the visa in your passport.
And just out of curiosity, what's one of the most interesting questions they might ask you? I assume there's a little bit of why do you want to come to Russia in there?
Yeah, no, actually not so much. It's really your background. If you've been a former military, please describe. Have you ever been trained in weapons? Most of our travelers, it's all no. List every country you've been to in the last 10 years, which is an impossibility for people like you and I who travel all the time. But if you write down, we know the ins and outs. We know how to answer the questions without doing 3 days of research on every time you left the United States.
Okay, good to know. And then I love what you said when we first spoke maybe 2 months ago. Everything is difficult, but nothing is impossible in Russia.
Yep, that's it. They just don't make daily life easy for Russians, and it's not personal to us. It's what they do to themselves. But if somebody tells me they want to do something as outrageous or outlandish, go into museums that are, before they open in the morning or after hours, or do a reception, nothing is off the table. Really, they're very, very. I can only remember a couple of times. I had a professional photographer wanted to photograph the mausoleum, wanted to photograph Lenin, and that was a hard no. I never did. If you look online, there are a few people over the decades that have snuck a photo of him. But basically there are no photos of Lenin.
I love that you said that's a hard no, because I always say to my clients who ask me something, I'm like, I'm always happy to ask for anything, but I like the expression, well, no, that's a hard no. So I haven't had a hard no yet.
Yeah, I mean, for a country like Russia to have only one hard no, I mean.
Yeah, that's your only hard no so far?
Yeah, and the irony, Mimi, is that we also operate in Scandinavia, and it is one of the hardest places in the world for us to operate because everyone is equal. So if you want to go into the museum before hours or after, they don't even understand what you're talking about. Whereas Russia, it's like, yeah, we charge this for that. It's like, well, that we'll have to hire people to come back in, security and whatever. And if you want to have a midnight dinner, that'll
Right.
be more expensive. But everything's on the table.
Interesting. Okay. Well, there's some reasons that more, nimble entrepreneurial type places are better for our clients because they might want to do something really cool. And if you're going to Scandinavia, the answer might be no.
Yeah, we did a bachelor party for a group of guys from New York, investment bankers and lawyers, and they were all in their 20s, and they wanted the most outrageous bachelor party. And we had them driving tanks, and they sat down with a general who poured them all vodkas for an hour, and then they drove and then started shooting, the bazookas. And I mean, yeah, these guys, I ran into the guy just recently who did it for us. Like, it was the most extraordinary trip that any of them have taken for the rest of their lives.
So that does sound really unique. I wonder whose crazy idea it was to have a bachelor party. Where was this? In St. Petersburg or in Moscow?
Actually, they just stayed in Moscow.
In Moscow.
Yep.
I don't know who thinks of stuff like that. I feel like sometimes bachelor parties, things can go wrong. And if things go wrong, I don't want to necessarily be maybe in this particular country.
It was all under control. We even had a nightlife guide who, helped them at night and eased their way to go into some of the hot nightclubs, which can be very difficult for 8 guys to go into. But yeah, no, it was all. I make it sound a little bit the thing about the drinking and the guns, but it was all safe. It was all, the guardrails were still up.
Okay, good. And so it sounds like maybe with the hot night spots, Russia's like other places where if it was 8 women who wanted to come in, it wouldn't be so difficult. But 8 guys, it's a different story.
Correct. Absolutely correct. Yep.
Good to know. All right. Well, thank you so much, Greg. This has been a wealth of information and super inspiring. I look forward to my first trip to Russia one day. We'll see if I'll get there more than once in my life, but I'll definitely get there once. So
I hope I get a chance to take you there myself.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to that. Thank you so much for your time today, and we'll be in touch when it's ready and the right time to get people to Russia.
Perfect. Thanks, Mimi.
All right. Take care.
Take care.